And we learned this morning there's been an increase in the number of reported hate crimes against the Jewish community here in Britain. It's up by 11% in the first 6 months of this year, including a big increase, a big spike in reported incidents of hate crime, anti-Semitic hate crime in London and in Manchester, where I think traditionally the country's two largest Jewish communities lived. To discuss this, we're now joined by Mark Gardner, the Director of Communications at CST, which is the Community Security Trust. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Paul.
Can you tell us first, please, a bit about the work that the CST does?
Sure. CST is a registered charity. We provide security, advice, assistance, and personnel to Jewish communities throughout Britain. And also, if somebody unfortunately suffers a racist attack, then we would ask them to either report to us or to the police. And we have confidential data sharing agreements in place with police and get a lot of cooperation from them.
And now, did you get wind of the fact there was this increase in anti-Semitic attacks, anti-Semitic hate crime in this country, up 11%?
Well, yeah, that's our bread and butter work, as it were. We're unfortunately dealing with, well, at the moment, dozens and dozens of reports from Jewish people across the UK on a monthly basis, and the problem really is that in an average month now, the figures are almost twice as high as they were only 5 years ago.
And is there any indication as to who's doing this? I mean, we've had anti-Semitic attacks in Paris, for example, dreadfully at that supermarket. Is this directed from one community in particular towards the Jewish community?
No, that's one of the things that's happened this year, is that the majority of perpetrators are white thugs, and then about a third of the perpetrators would seem to be basically Muslim thugs. That's how it breaks down. There is an overrepresentation of apparently Muslim perpetrators, but when you look at actually the neighbourhoods in which Jews live and the general profile of who commits criminal acts in general, the age profile, the demography is not as out of kilter as it first seems. But this seems to us to largely be racism directed against Jews. There's nothing going on in Israel, as sometimes happens when there's a sudden spike in anti-Semitic incident levels here. I think we're just feeling across society racist problems, some divisiveness, blame games, this kind of discourse and discussion, and this is the Jewish aspect of that.
Now, I mentioned earlier on there's an increase in London and Manchester, which is perhaps predictable because that's where I think the largest Jewish communities live.
Yeah, for sure.
There are roughly something like 250,000 Jewish people in this country, roughly. What's the mood like amongst the Jewish community?
I think the mood is basically tense, so that you can lead a great Jewish life in London or Manchester, whatever sort of Jewish life you want to lead or don't want to lead. So most of the time, life for Jewish people is actually really, really good. You might unfortunately suffer an anti-Semitic incident, and there are some times when anti-Semitism is in the news, like all the stuff to do with the Labour Party, when it gets into the forefront of people's minds and you become quite tense about it all. But as I say, most of the time, Jewish life in Britain is actually really good, and it's a shame that we tend to talk about anti-Semitism, whereas the day-to-day life isn't newsworthy, but it is the reality for most of us.
Now, you've mentioned anti-Semitism and allegations of that in the Labour Party. We learned in today's Times newspaper, and you might not have seen this, Mark, that a leaked paper suppressed by the party, the Labour Party, has revealed reports of anti-Semitic behaviour at Oxford University, where some Jewish students felt too intimidated to attend party meetings. What the hell is going on in the Labour Party in Oxford, well, in particular, and in Labour in general?
This is a whole huge subject. Basically, it's not the entire Labour Party, because there are many, many very good parliamentarians and local activists who are totally opposed to anti-Semitism. But there is a problem within the party. I think if you wanted to be really generous, you would say that it's what they call anti-Zionism, but impacting obviously against Jews, because when you go on and on about Zionism or Zionists in utterly hateful, despicable ways, who are you going to carry out your anger against? Well, of course you're going to carry out your anger against Jews. So that's being charitable about it, because the people who commit this behaviour don't self-regard themselves as being racists, of course. They don't consider themselves to be anti-Semites. They think they're opposed to anti-Semitism.
And of course there are. I mean, I've got Jewish friends and colleagues who are anti-some Israeli policies and anti-Zionist in the broader sense.
Yeah, Jewish people have got a huge range of opinions on Israel, on Zionism, but the idea that a British Jew or a Jewish member of the Labour Party or a Jewish student should first of all have to pass some kind of loyalty test or a morality test, declare how they feel about basically an overseas country and conflict is quite ridiculous. They should just be able to be equal members of the Labour Party like anybody else is.
Thank you for your time this morning and your measured words there. That was Mark Gardner from CST, the Community Security Trust, talking to me, Paul Ross, on Talk Radio.